So position number 1 of 5. Number 1 is that when I perform a piece of music, it's my responsibility to make sure I'm performing the piece of music exactly as the composer wanted. That is to say, I need to make sure that my instrument is the same instrument that the composer intended it to be composed for and performed on, and that I've got to make sure that all of the nuances of the performance, all of the gradings of dynamics, all of the stylistic properties of that performance are exactly as the composer intended. Because it's not for me as a modern performer to take liberties on that and to say, actually, my style, today's style, is more suitable for this old piece of music. I can just throw that out the window and say, you know, the modern style is what goes. I'm no person to say that. My concern is to really pay tribute to the composer, pay tribute to the style of the composition, and I cannot pay tribute to the style of the composition unless I perform it in exactly the way the composer wanted and intended. Okay, so this is the extreme position to start with. Authenticity. The idea that I have to be performing the work exactly as the composer wanted. That's position number 1. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Let's go to position number 5. Position number 5 says, I don't really care how the composer intended the piece of music to sound in their own style. I, as a modern performer, have my own set of values which are different from the composer's. I have my own set of influences. I've heard music and I know music that the composer never heard and never knew, which means that I have the license now to actually bring fresh ideas to the piece of music, and I'm not going to be limited by the way in which the composer thought about it in the narrow view of their own time. I'm going to liberate this music for everyone. And the most important thing is that I speak to my audience in a language that they understand, and in a musical language which is familiar to them, so that I can communicate effectively. Okay, that is what interpretation's all about, isn't it? Communicating effectively with your audience, and that is my only concern. I have absolutely no concern in pleasing a composer who a lot of the times is no longer with us, and so I can't really please them with my performance, and I shouldn't try to do it in a way which would be pleasing to them. I only need to please my audience. Okay, so those are the extreme positions. Number 1 says I have to do it exactly as the composer intended. Number 5, at the other end of the spectrum, says I don't care what the composer thought. Number 3 in the middle. Number 3 says, well, I think it's really important to understand the values of the piece of music as the composer intended it, to really have a good understanding of the style in which the composer intended it to be written. I don't care so much about actually pleasing the composer when I'm performing it. I can see that that might shape my concept of the work, but actually I also have my own ideas that I want to support the performance with, and I want to make the music speak with some of my own ideas. So I can kind of see both parts, but number 3 is the middle position, the middle ground between those two, that says, well, I can see both sides, but I don't really tend towards one or the other. Okay. So we have a spectrum of 5 positions, 2 extremes. I do care about the composer so much that I have to do everything that they wanted and do it exactly as they wanted. Number 5, the other extreme, I don't care so much. Number 3 in the middle, can see both ways. We have 2 extra spaces, of course, number 2 and number 4. Number 2, which is inclined towards taking that position towards the composer. Number 4, which is inclined towards ditching the ideas of the composer, but can kind of, isn't quite a number 5. So I'm going to play some music in a moment that will help you to discuss this. But what I want to do first, there are, how many of us are there? There are 12 of us all together. So we're going to go just for a very, very quick breakout. And I want you to decide, please, where you are on that spectrum. Are you a number 1 that says you have to do it the composer's way, and number 5 that says I've got absolutely no interest in the composer? Are you in the middle, in the 3, or do you sort of have a slight balance towards either side. And if you've got any particular examples of performances that you've given or pieces of music repertoire that you've studied that help shape that view, then do bring those on. But it's just a very quick breakout. What is it, 9:58 now? We'll come back, let's say 4 minutes, which is not a lot because you're going to be in groups of 3. Okay, so let's do that. Just a very, very quick breakout, and you can sort of say hello to maybe some new people, who knows. So I'll do 4 groups, and I will see you in 4 minutes. Bring me back some ideas. See you in a moment. So the benefit of the recording, we've just been listening to Edward Elgar conducting his own Enigma variations. Hands in the air, folks. I give you a baton to conduct the orchestra. How many people have you? How many people are going to follow Elgar? Are going to copy Elgar and have their orchestra perform it in the same way as Elgar did? Absolutely nobody, and that's no surprise, is it, when you hear now? So here's the question: what right do we have to ignore Elgar then? What right do we have now? You know, we've paid our money for our text edition. We've bought the most expensive edition that we can, and we've made sure that what we've got in front of us is exactly what Elgar wanted to be written down. That's good. All of us do that all the time. And then we get the composer's baton, the conductor's baton, and we conduct our performance of it. And we put aside what the composer wanted, the way that the composer would have done it. What right do we have to do that? Or at least what might our reasons be for disregarding what we know the composer wanted in their performance? Anyone want to pick that up? Why would you not? Because none of you say you would do it as Elgar wanted. Why would you not do it as Elgar wanted? Silence. Okay, yeah. So tell me, how many of you, despite that though, despite the fact that you wouldn't do it that way, how many of you then would say that you enjoyed Elgar's performance? Who enjoyed Elgar's performance? Yeah, Joe, you enjoyed it. Yeah, Charlotte enjoyed it. Wheeling enjoyed it. Yeah. Lucy's nodding. Okay, we're getting more supporters for Elgar as we go through Toshiro. Right, brilliant. Tell me what you like about it then. Those of you that enjoyed it. I love it. I think it's brilliant. Tell us what you enjoyed.
I think oh, sorry.
Go on, Charlotte. Go on.
I think that the use of they obviously do the HL and things like that. I think there's more passion and emotion in that one than the Simon Rattle one, which is obviously because he composed it. Maybe he knows more when he was doing it in the moment. Maybe that came right. But the only thing that I didn't like about it was, I don't know what the technical term for it is, but obviously the strings all kind of seeped onto each note. And at the start, that kind of was quite off-putting. But then when it got more emotion and became a lot more passionate, I thought it worked quite well.
Yeah. What you can hear as well, if you listen very carefully, I didn't prep you in advance for this, and you might not have been aware, but to a varying extent, you can hear in that first melody, every single pair of notes has that portamento to some extent. And between every single pair of notes, some of them it's more obvious than others, but it's there all the time, which is quite extraordinary. So we don't like the portamento. Now we'll talk more about the portamento in a moment, because that's a very interesting aspect of actually how we might shape our own performance as well. But yeah, thank you, Charlotte. Anyone else want to follow up on that? Those of you that enjoyed it, things that, or maybe if you didn't enjoy it, tell us just the aspects that turn you towards it, turn you away from it. Okay, the Accelerando thing's really interesting as well, because yes, that might well be how Elgar thought about it himself, but also we know, and particularly from reading newspaper articles and reviews of Elgar's concerts, we know this is something that he did all the time, and this is just, you know, a trait of his conducting, that he used the tempo quite well, to quite a great extent in order to shape the composition. And a lot of people didn't like it, and he got a lot of quite bad reviews for the way in which he would push the tempo forward and hold back and do this sort of, I don't know if we'd call it rubato, it's more of a sort of long range rubato, isn't it? But just gradually speeding up a whole section and then coming back. And we know that this is not just the Enigma variations, this is not just his own music, but actually he did it when he was conducting anyone's music. And a lot of people thought it was too much. Any string players want to tell us about the portamento? What do you think of the portamento? Somebody, please. Don't be shy. You can hear my house is about to get more lively. As, we're isolating at the moment, but I'll just pause the recording. I won't tell you. I just want to tell us about portamento, please. What did you think of it? Or anyone else want to tell us about the portamento? Who liked the portamento? Nobody liked the portamento. Or Joe, are you sort of 50-50 there, or you no?
A little bit, but I think it was a little bit much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now this is a really interesting aspect. I'll just play that again. I'll turn the volume up as much as I can. But just have a listen. If I play the first few seconds, and you can hear. In fact, no, I'll play it to you in a moment. I'll play it to you. I'll tell you first of all what is happening, because as I said, you can hear there is some portamento between every single pair of notes in that whole chain of notes. And what's really interesting here is this is not Elgar saying to his orchestra, "I want you to slide this, I want you to slide that," and they all follow. We have this totally different culture in modern performance than they had, in 100 years ago, nearly in 1926, whereby today. Of course, if you're playing in an orchestra, and particularly if you're a string player, you're playing in this great big load of other string players, you will have, of course, the principal of the section working with the conductor to make sure that everyone's doing the same bowings, everyone's doing the same fingerings. If there is going to be portamento these days, then everyone's going to do it in the same place and agree the extent to which it's going to be done. This is the kind of very uniform style of orchestral playing that we have today, that we make sure that everyone in the section is we say singing from the same hymn sheet, but literally they're all going to be doing the same thing, and they work together as a section. That's our culture, isn't it? This is a totally different culture 100 years ago. This is where you stick each of the orchestral players down in front of their music, and they all do their own thing. Isn't that extraordinary? So each one of those violinists is interpreting the music in their own individual way. Each of them is like a soloist in a group. So it might be the case that if we're all sitting there and say, I'm just going down my list, but Amber wants to do portamento between the first and the second notes, and Charlotte wants to do it between the second and the third notes, and Emily wants to do it between the third and the fourth notes, and Jess between the fourth and the fifth notes, and so on. Then when we listen back, we can hear, oh, there's portamento between every single note. Why are they doing that? Well, they're not, but they're just all bringing their own interpretations to it. And some of the notes you'll hear that all of the players want to put portamento, because it's very fashionable, of course, in 1926. It dies out in the 1930s. If you listen to the recordings at the end of, I don't know what it is about the 1930s, but up until about 1932, recordings seem to be full of orchestral portamento in the strings. By 1940, it's very, very rare to hear any at all. Something's happened in those 8 years or so. I don't know what. But it might well be the case that all of them or half of them want to do a portamento on a particular pertinent set of notes. So that's when you start to hear it more. But just have a listen to that again, and you can hear, as I said, every single pair of notes has some sort of a portamento on it, and it's that sort of free style. Let's go again. Oh no, that's Simon Rattle. Here we go. Yeah, I love that. It's wonderful stuff. Okay. So, we have our scale 1 to 5. Number 1 says you've got to do it exactly as the composer wants. Number 5 says you can not bother at all. I'm not bothered at all about what the composer wants. Anyone who's not spoken yet, where are we? Is anyone on a 4 or a 5? I'm interested to hear from people on that side of the spectrum. Because I've heard of a few sort of 3s teetering towards 2. Is anyone a 4 or a 5? Nobody's. So let's have a bit of a show, shall we? If you want to, who's on a 3 at the moment? Is anyone a 3? Yeah, we got a good load of us on 3s. Okay, good, thank you. Is anybody a 4 at all? Anybody a 4? No. Oh, Toshi, you're a 4. Do you want to tell us about being a number 4, Toshi? So, yeah, tell us about, because I mean, I think in the context of what we've just listened to, I think that probably makes more sense to go towards that side of the scale, doesn't it? Being a number 4, just tell us about sort of your views of how you find that interpretation and how you navigate your way around an interpretation like that.
This interpretation by just choose. I don't know just what first one is by conducted by, and this one other is Simon Rattle, and just soloist just came navigation just beautifully,
Mm-hmm.
and just chamber work like quite sort of dimension at this time even, and like sound like mysterious qualities.
Yeah. There are the different qualities in different sort of genres of music making that you're sort of looking to bring out. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, just not clear for navigation.
Oh, right. So yeah, so I'm just talking about the way in which you make the decision, or the way in which, you know, the kind of the influences, what's influencing you. If you're influenced by your own sort of your own free interpretation of a piece of music, or if you feel that you need to really think carefully about exactly what the composer was wanting. That's navigation.
Just decide by original composition, like form score.
Yeah. Okay, and you can consider that score in a number of ways. Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot like that. It's, I know that you just gave me a thumbs up rather than a view, but thank you for that. Okay, anyone else want to comment on that? Okie dokie. So let's go on then. I'll play you something which I think kind of goes the other way in some ways. We're going more towards actually looking at the particular aspects of a composition and how it might have been created, and going into views of historical performance practice, which, as I said, I engage a lot with aspects of performance practice. And a lot of the times I do perform, particularly if I'm performing on period instruments, I do perform in a way which I think, you know, what would the composer have intended? How would they have intended it to be heard? And my reason for doing this is perhaps not the reason that many people think, that, you know, there's a need for authenticity, but often actually when you engage with the composer's own ideas, and particularly their own instruments, their own approaches to an instrument or their voice, or whatever they might be doing, it often gives you ideas for performance that you could not have dreamt up in a million years if you'd have just stuck to a modern style of performance. I'm going to play a really interesting recording. This is by a guy called Tom Bagan, who's a pianist. And this is Mozart's famous Rondo alla Turca. You know this thing. Now, this is a performance on a piano which has been built to resemble Mozart's own piano. It's not Mozart's own piano. We do still have Mozart's piano, but this is a reproduction of it. And there is a view that certainly we know that some pianos at the time had, now let me get a piece of paper and I can show you this, had in them a thing called a bassoon stop. We don't have any bassoonists, do we? That's good. We have Jess as a double reed player, but it's different from a bassoon, isn't it? So that's okay. This is a bit of an insult to bassoon players. This is why I go carefully around this point. Let me just I've got an overhead camera here, which is quite useful for showing things on the piano. But I can also show you inside the piano. And what happens is when you use the bassoon stop, here we go, inside my piano. Welcome to the depths within. When you use the bassoon stop on an old piano, what it actually did is it's just a pedal, a bit like an organ stop, but it would put a sheet of paper, it would slide the sheet of paper onto the strings, okay? Like this. You can recreate this with a modern piece of paper, like this. Okay. So there's my piece of paper in there, and okay. And so where that piece of paper is covering, you can make that buzzing sound. And they thought, oh, we'll call it a bassoon stop because it sounds just like a bassoon, doesn't it? Yeah. It's not actually a very good piece of paper, that. I might just stick a... let's try something a bit more weighty, shall we? Let's stick some cards on there as well, because it's fluttering around a bit, and it's not making quite the... There we go. There's a buzzy sound. It's like an 18th century prepared piano. So you get this. Let me just move that a little bit. I can move that out of the way, like that. Yeah. If I move it like that, that's better. So you get this. So you can hear the percussive nature of the bass line. Okay. Now, this we know about from pianos that we have this bassoon stop on. Tom Bagan's got this idea. Tom Bagan's brilliant. He's a bit of a... I hesitate to call him a maverick performer because he's so good and so interesting, but he performs pieces of music in a way which sounds so bizarre to many of us to modern standards, and yet everything that he does can be justified historically, and this is the wonderful thing. And he's decided that for this recording that it's very possible that because there was this thing called the bassoon stop that put the paper on the string to make it have that buzzy sound, there must have been a tradition before of people putting paper inside their piano in order to create that effect, because why would they then need to make a mechanism that did it if people weren't already doing it by some sort of automatic means, by some sort of manual means. So this is his recording of Mozart's Rondo alla Turca. Now, the two things you need to know about this. One of them is that you can hear the paper which he puts in the strings and he takes out the strings at certain points, I think, so that you get that buzzy effect. But also, we have this big thing on the piano of course, do you play Mozart with a pedal? Okay. Or do you not? Mozart's piano, we know, had two stops, and again they're like organ stops, and they're either side of the piano, like here. And what you have to do if you want to use the pedal, he didn't have a pedal, if you want to take the dampers off, do that, you have to pull the stops in order to raise the dampers. But it means that your hands have to, both of them, be free. So it's like putting the pedal down on the piano. If you want to put the pedal down, both your hands have to be free. You stop playing, you pull them out, the dampers go up. You get that, and then you can't actually stop that sound. You can't actually, take the pedal off, as it were, until both your hands are free again, and you can push them back in. Okay. So this idea that we have of Mozart as a very clean composer, writing very clear, clean music, actually goes out the window a little bit, because if he did use that sort of the dampers in that way, then there must be these whole sections of music which are undamped, and this is the effect. So you'll hear first of all the bassoon stop, which is made. Sorry, I'm just making sure that I have shared that all that. I keep doing things in classes where I play music and no one can hear it because I've only shared the screen and not the sound. Right, let's have a listen to this. So you'll hear first of all that paper rattling away as they thought an imitation of a bassoon, but it's certainly, in the Turkish march, it's much more of a percussive effect, which I think is the point. It's got that jangly percussive quality to it, which is really good, which is what we want. And also you'll hear how so much of it is just very, very cloudy because he just takes the dampers away. This is Mozart as you've probably never heard him before, and yet, historically, everything is justifiable. I think it's brilliant. And then we take the dampers off completely. You'll notice he's taken the paper out of the piano at this point. And he's going to put the paper back in a moment. I think we just repeat that. Okay, put the paper back in the piano. Take the dampers away. Dampers. Oh no, dampers on in a moment. We'll just repeat first. Okay, dampers back on for that sound. What a sound, hey? Now, how many of you like that? How many of you enjoyed that? Yeah, a couple of you enjoyed it. Anyone not enjoy it? So nobody didn't enjoy it. Only a couple of you prepared to say you did enjoy it. It's interesting, isn't it? I think that's the thing that we can agree on. It's really interesting, and this is, one of the things that really gets me is because I hear so much about people say that when you're performing it in a historic style by the conventions of the composer and by using historic performance practice, you're limiting yourself to a certain set of values, and you can't sort of liberate the music, and you can't liberate yourself. And I think so much of that is nonsense. Really, you can hear that so many things that you can do in a historic style, which is not limiting the performance at all. It's actually opening it up to all sorts of ranges of possibilities that you would never dream of doing otherwise. Okay. I'm going to play one more recording in a moment. I'm just wondering, does anyone want to speak to us about where they are on our scale? If you're a 2 or a 3, or why you're a 2 or a 3. Who's still a 3? Can we hear from another 3? Anyone still a 3? Lisa, you're a 3. Do you want to talk to us, Lisa? Hi.
Yeah, I'd say it maybe similarly to Lucy, like almost like an average of a 3. It would hugely depend on the piece I was learning. So I'd say to start with, maybe I'm a 1 and I will learn exactly what's on the page. And until that is solid and almost like muscle memory in a way. But then I like to then put my own little flavour to it. Or for example, if I'm learning one of Handel's Da Capo arias, I'll then put my own ideas in with ornamentation and all sorts of things. And then also things like the song cycle by Poulenc, I think it's very important to think of spaces where you just need to take a breath, or where the music needs to just sort of, I don't know, almost the continuation of the piece needs a little bit of your own touch to it. And so I'd say I don't go very far with putting my own touch to a piece, but I think putting your own little ideas is okay to do.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because I think one thing that we find, it seems quite strange in many ways, but I think it makes sense. There's so many people who, like you talked about an interest in early music, and a lot of people who have that interest also have this interest in more contemporary music as well. And you think that in many ways those would be opposite extremes, and they're not, are they? It has that same sort of sense of values, of the strictness that we often have to treat contemporary music with, and those sorts of values which are shared between the two. And then Fauré in the middle, where Poulenc in the middle with where Lucy was talking before about the sort of the linguistic aspect of the music, and how often that shapes how you're performing the piece rather than actually the notes on the page. So that's really interesting. Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you.
With Handel, is it also like interesting to note the different, so you've obviously got the difference in pitch going down a semitone, and then the difference between singing it on a harpsichord compared to a modern piano. I think that's really interesting to think about, because my teacher personally prefers everything Handel around that era to be done on a harpsichord, because the sound is more supported, whereas with the modern piano, you are kind of left to fend for yourself in coloratura kind of arias. I just thought I'd...
No, that's really interesting. Just tell us maybe, if you can, Lucy, a bit more about that experience of, because obviously for me as a keyboard player, if I approach that music, I'm playing it on a piano or I'm playing it on a harpsichord, and those are two completely different approaches, it's a different instrument. Now, if you're singing, and obviously you've got the same voice each time, but tell us about the difference about actually being supported by a harpsichord. Supported is the wrong word, but doing it alongside a harpsichord and doing it alongside a piano. What's the difference for you singing alongside those?
Firstly, it's easier with a harpsichord. I don't know if this is just my voice, but taking it down that semitone is it completely changes the piece. It's so much easier to sing, and it's got more fluidity. But then you've got the kind of weightiness of the harpsichord underneath you, which it kind of supports you in a way that the modern piano can't. And it gives you more, I'm going to use the word oomph, but that's not a very technical term. But
It's a
it
very
gives you
technical term. We understand it, yeah.
gives you more like oomph and like to perform it rather than being like, oh God, am I going to get all these notes in the right order at the right speed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So you relax and engage more with the musical qualities of it, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay. So I'm gonna close. I'm gonna play you one last thing, which I just think is wonderful. And we've talked about ones. Perhaps the last thing I played you was a number one. The Elgar was certainly a number one, wasn't it? If you're there, we've not sort of talked about the other end of the scale. I'm going to play you a number five. And I can't do this as I often like to do anonymously, and do it without telling you what it is, because you can see what it is because I have to share the screen. And this is Bach, as you can see. This is Johann Sebastian Bach, but this is a recording of Leopold Stokowski, who you can see I've got recordings here of him conducting Rachmaninoff, actually Rachmaninoff at the piano, and Stokowski conducting Rachmaninoff's piano concertos, as they often did together. So he's in that sort of tradition, the high romantic tradition, the late romantic tradition. And here, it's a remastered recording. It sounds a lot more modern than it actually is, but an old recording, I think from the 1940s perhaps, of him conducting Bach, Komm süße Tod, which is just a he's embellished it, he's arranged it for orchestra himself, but it's Bach. And if I play this to you and don't tell you what it is, I'd like to guess you would never really believe it was Bach. You'd never guess it was Bach, because he makes it into a piece of the late romantic style. But it's very much Bach. It's all Bach's notes. It's all Bach's harmony. And I just think it's absolutely wonderful. And it's well up there as a 5. It's probably beyond 5 on that spectrum. Have a listen. we go. And there's another half to it where it then repeats. Actually, he's played in the winds, but that's Bach. And it's a number 5, isn't it? It's way off there. There's no of the qualities that we would normally expect to hear in a Bach performance there at all. But isn't it just wonderful, orchestral playing, and just the whole Stokowski's knack with the symphony orchestra. He actually, used. Much he played a lot of contemporary music with them and was a great supporter and advocate for contemporary music, and actually got sacked from, I think, the Philadelphia Orchestra for playing too much contemporary music. They didn't like all the modern stuff that he was doing, but also was quite a populist conductor. Worked with Walt Disney on Fantasia, and really saw that he could bring a lot of quite difficult music to quite a big audience. And a lot of his techniques for getting the string players to use different bowings so that you get that continuous sound like you get in the Elgar, to get his wind players to overlap their breathing so that you get that very lush ongoing quality to it, and it just creates something which we hardly recognize as Bach at all, but isn't that just wonderful playing? Okay, thank you very much, folks, for a little discussion this morning. What we're going to be doing, as you know, we've got reading week next week. It's very early in the course, isn't it, to have reading week next week? But we have no class next week, and then we're going to meet in 2 weeks from today. Okay, and as I said, what I'm going to be doing is putting together a series of topics for us to discuss that will develop your research, I hope, in as widely as possible. What I would like you to do for me for next time, please, is to put together, I would like everybody to present something to the class for 3 minutes. Now, I'm going to have to be very strict about 3 minutes because there are a lot of us here and we have limited time. So 3 minutes each, a 3-minute presentation, which is going to be covering the ground of your, basically outlining the subject of your presentation. Okay, outlining what it is. So if you're not sure and you want to get in touch with me and just discuss a few ideas, this is the time to do it. Or just, sit down and get the ball rolling. But what I want to do as early as possible in these sessions is really to set the ball rolling so that you've got some sort of an agenda, you've got some sort of a direction of where you're going. Once you've got that idea in place that you can tell us about a particular piece of music or a particular aspect of performance that you want to discuss, and you can set that out in 3 minutes, then we can expand it to something which is much more the kind of size that you'll expect for a presentation that you'll be marked on for the end of the year. So this is not marked at all. This has got nothing to do with any of the mark scheme or anything to do like that. It's simply about setting the ball rolling on your research, and you just really trying to focus your ideas and focus them so that you can outline them in just 3 minutes. Okay, so that's in 2 weeks' time, and you can do that. Has anyone got any questions about that before we finish today? No. So 3 minutes in 2 weeks' time. You can have a week off next week, and you can use that time to decide for yourself. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to meet all of you this morning and to talk to some of you. As we do more through the term and we do breakout groups, I hope to meet and speak to more of you in more depth, and as we get those presentations finalised. Thank you very much, guys. Have a wonderful week. The rest of the week, I will see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye for now.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.